Welcome to the Get Sculpted podcast. We're your hosts, Tiana,
Jordana,
and Marilyn.
This podcast is all about cutting through the noise and giving you the real deal on fat loss, muscle building, and what it really takes to build your 2.0 sculpted self, inside and out. Our motto is to work smarter, not harder. We'll break down science-based and actionable strategies to optimize your metabolism, ditch the diets, and create a sustainable, fit, and healthy lifestyle that actually works for you. So if you're ready to get stronger, not just skinnier, and embrace a body you love, hit that subscribe button and let's get sculpted.
Hello and happy October. We are so happy to have you here joining us for this episode of the Get Sculpted podcast. Today, we are talking about a bit of a hot button topic because for so many women, when it comes to food and fat loss, the word tracking brings up a lot of negative feelings and they see it as restrictive, obsessive, something they absolutely don't want to do. But at the same time, we hear these same women telling us that they're eating healthy or they're eating clean, yet they're still not losing weight. And we get it. We've talked about it on this podcast before. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you're putting effort in, making sacrifices, and nothing's happening. But what everyone listening needs to understand is this. Eating healthy and eating for your goals are not the same thing. And what we want you to take away from the chat today is that tracking your food is not about being obsessive. It is about being aware, because when you don't have awareness, it is so easy to get stuck in diet traps. So in this episode, we're breaking it all down. Why tracking your food matters when it comes to actually getting results, the common diet traps that so many women get stuck in, and how to shift to something that is way more sustainable and actually works. So girls, are we ready to dive into this hot button issue today?
Let's go.
I'm very ready because there's a lot of resistance with tracking. So For those who are thinking this is not for me, we want you to really listen to this till the end because we're going to shift your perspective there.
Have an open mind. You have three women here who've had a variety of background in our lives, and we have a lot of varying experiences, but we've all come down to the same idea that tracking is important and tracking matters.
Very important. So that's what actually we're going to start with. So let's do it. Why does tracking matter so much? Plain and simple, if you have an outcome-based goal, okay, so whether it's losing fat, building muscle, changing your body composition, tracking matters. Full stop. It absolutely matters. So for fat loss, you need to be in a calorie deficit. For muscle building, you need to be eating enough calories and enough protein to support your growth. And these are not our opinions. This is physiology. This is how the body works. But you can't actually know if you're doing any of that without having a level of awareness. Otherwise, you're just guessing. You really are just like throwing things at a wall, hoping it sticks. And that is why tracking matters so much, because you can be eating all the healthy food, all the clean food that you want. But if you're overshooting calories, fat loss stalls out. So when you're not tracking, what we see a lot as coaches is that it is so easy to also consume extra calories that you don't even realize are adding up. Things like oils. What else have we seen? Salad dressing,
cheese, avocado,
the handful of this and that you might be taking.
Portion sizes in general.
And this one too, like licking the knife. Let's say you're making your kids a sandwich, like peanut butter sandwich.
Volume versus weight is a big one. So like cups and tablespoons and teaspoons versus grams. Yeah.
Exactly. So all of this adds up when you don't have this accuracy. So I want to repeat this loud and clear. Without proper tracking, you are guessing. And guessing is what keeps you stuck. And this is where the mindset shift also has to happen, because tracking isn't about punishment. It's not about restriction. And again, I know a lot of people find it a trigger because maybe things they did in the past, that's exactly what that was. But what we're talking about here is clarity, because the only way to know what you're eating is to track. And that's how you know things line up with your goals. And then once you have that clarity and you're more in control, then you know what levers to pull to get closer to your goals instead of just spinning your wheels. So T, I would love for you to maybe talk to us about what happens, because we get a lot of women, like you said, resisting, right? They don't want to track, but then they fall into other diet trends and other traps. So let's maybe talk a bit about that.
Yes, because I do want to start by framing this as I think a lot of women are unknowingly like resisting food tracking, but they're leaning into other things that are sucking up a lot of their time and mental energy.
Yes.
That could be spent to things more conducive to the result that they want, like tracking their food. So in other words, I think there's this limiting belief that tracking takes up a lot of time and brain power, but your time and brain power is already taken up by other things. So that's what I want to talk about. Number one thing that we're going to start with is fasting. This is something that I've heard so many women say. And let me tell you something. I don't know about you guys, but when I ask someone, okay, you've tried intermittent fasting. Why did you try it? I swear most women can't even say why. They just say, I read that it's good for women over 40.
Right.
Yeah, right. But like, what is the thing you're trying to achieve? And then I ask them questions and they're like, I'm trying to lose body fat. Of course, that's my main thing. And I'm like, all right. In that case, we have one need and one need only. That's to reduce your calories. And intermittent fasting can do that, but it's not a magic pill. It's not the be all end all. It's going to reduce your calories, but like maybe it might not. And we don't know by how much. And there's just no clear data. Okay. Another one is clean eating. All these things, by the way, they have the thing in common that they do reduce your calories. Like if you intermittent fasted and lost weight, you were in a calorie deficit. If you're eating clean, it means that there's no such thing as clean and dirty food. But people say that meaning whole food. Okay, that's fair. We want whole foods. They're great. If you're eating mostly chicken and rice and potatoes and like vegetables, you're going to have a harder time eating more calories. If you were like, okay, go eat 1,000 calories at McDonald's, that's probably not even a meal. So with clean eating, it's just not something trackable and repeatable. So if someone says I'm doing all the right things and not losing weight, but they're eating only whole foods, it's the calorie intake.
Yeah.
And then another hot button topic that I'd love your guys' perspective on too, intuitive eating. And this is where I'm going to throw in my unpopular opinion because people will say, I want to intuitively eat. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's fair to say, I want to graduate to not counting calories forever. That's cool. I think it's also okay to want to do it. I love it. I love the data tracking. I do it to this day and I always will. Okay. However, you can graduate to a place where you're eating intuitively. However, right now, what your body's telling you is it just sees food as energy. And if you don't really have a concept of portions, not even just portions, but the amount of calories and nutrients in food, your body could tell you to intuitively eat a donut or 2 cups of rice. And I don't like chicken. And all of a sudden, your protein's super low, your fats and carbs are super high, you're not losing fat, you're not building muscle, you're frustrated. Like, that's not the outcome that you want. Jord, please speak to this.
I'm like, I have a lot to say about intuitive eating.
Okay, talk to us.
Because from an eating psychology coaching perspective, intuitive eating is initially used for eating disorder or disordered eating recovery, right? This is about learning to trust your hunger cues. It is learning to accept that you have hunger and that you need to eat and to be able to follow through on that in a regular intervals throughout the day. And so what intuitive eating was meant to do was allow you to come back to home base from so much restriction or so much overindulgence to coming back to less of these rules that somebody might have placed in their mind, which becomes a mental health disorder and an eating disorder, and allowing them to be more free with themselves with food. I think that the weight loss industry has co-opted intuitive eating into this mythical, wonderful fairy tale place that people are supposed to graduate into. And even us, sometimes we use this lingo of like, I want you to get to this freer place with food because we don't have a better term for it, right? So we've used this language around intuitive eating. And I think that a lot of people are misplacing what it actually is versus what we've been using that language for. And so what people are doing is they're then saying, well, I'm just eating based off of like my hunger cues. That's great, but you're never going to lose fat. Like you said, oh, I want a donut. Okay, great. Have the donut, but then your goal is not fat loss.
I love that.
Right? So the goal and the plan has to align with one another.
Thank you. Like what you said is so true.
Yes, and intuitive eating can't be the tool you use for actual fat loss. It can be something you partially adopt elements of once you're getting to maintenance and you're learning how to live a lifestyle. That is a totally different thing. And so I have just so much to say on this topic.
Yeah. Can I add one thing too, Jordan? Obviously I agree with everything that you're saying, but I also think let's take it out of the context of disordered eating or eating disorders. In the work that we do with women, because we hear that thrown around a lot. So I totally agree in terms of the misplacement. I like that more than misuse, misplacement. But I also think to get to a point where you're intuitive eating for the people who work with us, because they do come with body composition goals, it is a skill you have to also learn. You almost do have to graduate to intuitive eating because like we've talked about so many times, the women who come to us are, I am going to use this word, victims of so much diet culture. They don't know their hunger and fullness. They don't even actually have a concept of what any of this means. So to just say intuitive eating, aside from the fact that, yes, you're not going to reach your fat loss goals, that's so abstract to them. They have no idea.
I love that you said that at the beginning, Jord, that traditionally it began as something used for eating disorder recovery. And this is where I think women get lost, because I like the concept of it. I think they're just taking it the wrong way. Like they might think, oh, I see this one person eating intuitively and I want to do that. And then they're like, but how come for months and months I'm not seeing results? And this is because intuitive eating, it works well for maintenance. It's not going to create a deficit, because when you're in a calorie deficit, which, by the way, if you haven't heard it enough times, you need it for fat loss. That's the one thing you need for fat loss. So like you're going to be a little bit hungry. Your body doesn't naturally want that. It doesn't want to be hungry. It doesn't matter if you're 400 pounds or 100 pounds. It doesn't want to be hungry. So like if you're eating intuitively, you're more than likely putting yourself in maintenance. So that's something you graduate to. Okay, so another one that I was definitely victim to this was cutting out food groups.
Oh,
Same.
Me too.
I'm not saying this in a sciencey way, but I swear my opinion is that a lot of people convince themselves that they can't eat something. They don't actually have a sensitivity. They just see, oh, I heard that dairy was bad.
Yeah.
Was dairy giving you any problems? I will die without my Greek yogurt every day. I cut out dairy once, I remember, and gluten and all this for no reason whatsoever. And my digestion was way worse because I just had such limited foods that I was not eating enough. So you don't need to cut out anything to lose fat. If you feel better cutting it out for your sensitivities or your digestion, or of course, if you're allergic or you just don't like the food, by all means. But there's no magic food that you're going to cut out or add, for that matter, that's going to make you lose fat. It's the quantity.
So I totally agree with you. And the way that I would want to encourage everyone to think about food groups is become an explorer with food. Like you want to be thinking about how much variety can I include and keep, and how much different fruits and veggies and different carb sources and fat sources and protein sources can I include to create the variety, so that you have actually a healthy microbiome and you're not cutting things out to the point where your body then can no longer tolerate them. And there are certain situations where if you're like, hey, I can eat dairy, but like I do actually feel better when I have less of it, then cool, do that. But you don't need to have such a specific food rule in place to say all carb bad, no carb, all dairy bad, no dairy. Like be more flexible with your what's in and what's out, and like maybe look at it more like the dimmer switch concept that we've used on the pod here before, and be like, well, maybe I can dial up a little bit more on the dairy and dial down a bit on the gluten, and just have more flexibility to the approach, because it clearly hasn't worked for you in the past. So you're going to need to switch it up in order to actually get to those fat loss goals.
Well said. And then another one that I want to talk about too is if it fits your macros. So this one is something that we chatted about before too. And if you don't know what this is, it's abbreviated as IIFYM. It was like 10 years ago. People were just discovering that you don't need to only eat chicken and rice to get lean. Like, here's the thing. And there is some truth to it. You might be thinking, you know, if you're advanced, hey, but yeah, isn't it about hitting your macros? Like you're talking about food tracking. Yeah, but let me tell you something. If it fits your macros has been taken as like, okay, this is your protein, fat, and carbs and your calories, and like just throw some Pop-Tarts in there and, you know, throw some pretzels and chocolate chips and make up whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's all the same.
As long as it hits your macros.
Yes. Again, this is an example of where there's a little bit of truth to it, but people take it a totally different way. Yeah, it is down to the quantity of food to lose body fat. All right. But the quality of your food is so important for satiety, for your energy, for like your performance in the gym, for your digestion, just for your general health. Like nobody out there is arguing. I don't care if you're carnivore, keto, vegan. No one's saying that eating processed food all the time is going to be good for you. Like it's not. So while technically like you could reach fat loss goals fitting certain macros, the ultimate goal is that you're not just hitting the numbers. You're actually feeling and performing and recovering your best, keeping yourself fed. That's why we're practicing the rule of like 80-20 or 90-10 even. You're doing mostly whole one ingredient foods. You're building an eating pattern of like, this is my breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. You're not cramming a bunch of like protein bars in at 8 p.m. because you haven't hit your numbers. Did you guys add anything?
So I have a funny story about this because when I was still in my client days, like maybe 1 to 2 years into my fitness journey and learning about macros, and it was introduced to me, hey, these are your macros. I just want you to hit them every day. Like feel like it's almost like a bank account. It gets replenished every day and you're going to draw down on each column, protein, carbs, fats, and the calories will add up at the end of the day. I was like, this is so cool. I can basically eat my protein, whole foods, but my carbs and fats, they can basically be like candy. And I am like kind of embarrassed to admit this, but like I actually really tried very hard to eat all the candy in my carbs and fats. Like I legit did that. And on like a Saturday or something, it was like, I wonder how much I could eat. Like what would one of my like, if I went to go buy a bunch of stuff when I used to have, you know, more of these binge behaviors before I healed a lot of elements around my relationship with food, how much could I eat and still be on track in my goals? And I think this is where we have a problem with if it fits your macros, because you're taking it to an extreme where it becomes, you're taking the concept of flexibility and you're taking it to an extreme where it's no longer helpful. And I discovered how much I could eat, and then I discovered how much I could go to the bathroom because I felt so sick from it.
Oh, no.
So I think it's like interesting, again, when you're coming at it from an explorer perspective, but that isn't a healthy long-term way that you want to be using food to nourish you, to help you feel good. You want to be using food to support your goals, not support old behaviors that didn't serve you in the first place.
Right. And that's what I'll say too, that great point, Jord, about coaching is like sometimes early on in my days as a coach, I didn't actually realize when you've done it for so long, you know, like, okay, I have the macros and I can take this and make meals. But what we do with our clients is like, all right, listen, first I'm going to give you the meals because this is what the meals should look like. The meals are whole foods, all right? But this is your numbers. So like what we do with our clients is we build more autonomy over time so that you're not married to a meal plan, but you're not glued to the macros either. Like you're just, you have an understanding of the numbers and this is what you should focus on too. So don't get in the trap, like you said, of just filling your carbs with junk and candy. You're not going to feel good and you're certainly not going to make the kind of results that you want. All right. So the final one trap women fall into is just the perfectionist trap. Thinking if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. Or if I can't get started and go full throttle, why even bother? We talk to women like this all the time and we're like, hey, is it ever a good time? Is it ever a good time to make a change? Like I've had plenty of clients, just to give an example, who are like, I'm going on a work trip and I have my fridge in the room. We can do a breakfast in the room. I can do lunch, like whatever, buy a salad from the grocery store. Dinners are always going to be out. And like, instead of saying, oh, you have a work trip for 7 days, see you in 7 days, just do what you can. Okay, no, but we're controlling the breakfast, lunch, and the snack.
Right.
And then, you know, we're doing our best to visually gauge the dinner, let's say, just as an example. And that's an example of how like, you don't need to go full throttle with food tracking all the time if you're not able to. It's still beneficial to get a pulse of most of the meals. And Jord, I know that you specifically, you worked with a lot of women who've tried these approaches, done the clean eating, the fasting, the macro tracking, the IFYM, and they're still stuck. So what do you feel like is the impact or the cost of doing these types of diet traps in the long run?
Okay, we're going to talk about 4. It's the emotional burnout side, it's the physical impact, it's the yo-yoing that happens, and then it's the element of how the scale ties into all of this and the obsession with that. So let's start with the first one around emotional burnout, because what happens is you're always starting over, and this constant cycle of feeling like you failed. So you jump in and you're like, okay, I'm ready to try this again. And then they start trying. And with that perfectionist mindset, they get through maybe the first Monday through Thursday. They're feeling so tired from trying to make all these decisions. This decision fatigue sets in. And by the time Friday hits, they've gone from their calorie deficit and they burn through the whole weekend, bringing themselves up to maintenance or surplus. And that happens so often that you just are like, I'm working so hard, but I'm getting nowhere. And they're spinning their wheels. Do you guys have clients or people that you've worked with that have been in that space too?
Absolutely.
I think almost every client, especially because a lot of the women who come to us, the age group that they're in, they've spent many, many years in this cycle. In fact, some of them can't even remember a time when they weren't in this cycle.
It's their identity.
Exactly, right? So that emotional burnout, I've even had calls with women who kind of hum and haw about, you know, starting on board with Get Sculpted because in their mind, it's just like, this is going to end like every other thing I've tried, right? And we really have to talk to them about how, no, this is not like everything you've tried. That's why this is going to work for you.
And the only difference between someone who succeeds and fails is that the successful person had more failures. Like you're never a failure
if you never quit.
If you never quit and you just haven't found the right approach.
Exactly.
That's right.
So many women think something's wrong with them and they don't step back to think about, oh, maybe it was my approach. Maybe it was my mindset around it. And there's another way to think about it. So the second one is the physical impact. So every time we go through this starting, stopping, these intense diets, and then going back up into a calorie surplus. So trying to stay in a calorie deficit, you're trying so hard. Maybe you're losing like 5 or 10 pounds. You're making some progress, but it was so hard you can't sustain it anymore that then you come back up and over into gaining the weight back. Maybe you've even gained a couple more pounds. And there's a physical impact to that. There's, your metabolism down regulating so that you're burning fewer calories in the day and your body is storing more fat. You might even lose some muscle. You're going to have lower energy as a result of all of that. And because of these diet traps, they create these extremes all the time. You're just going to end up staying stuck over and over and over again. And that's how we end up seeing a lot of women being this like skinny fat term. And they're like, well, I've tried all these things. I've done all these things, but I still don't look like I work out. And it's because we need to adjust the formula so that they can take that effort and repurpose it into the right strategy, which is heavier lifting, more appropriate balanced meals, probably higher calories than they've been used to eating. And then they kind of work that process in a much more balanced approach so that they can preserve their energy. If it's that Monday to Thursday, Friday example, they still have energy for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We don't want them burnt out by Thursday. The next one is the yo-yo cycle. So we've talked a little bit about this one, that super strict diet, the binging, the guilt, and then they repeat over and over and over again. And this is something like Mary, you said, women get stuck here for decades. Like their entire adult life could be literally this going over and over again, either every year, every 6 months, or every big life stage. And the hardest part is that every time you restart, it feels harder. The mountain gets bigger, the hill gets higher, it's steeper, and the bounce back from like the weight gain that you might have experienced is worse. So would you girls add anything to that one? What would you say about it?
I was going to add that physiologically too, like you don't want to be in the cycle of gaining and losing weight because you're getting more fat cells every time you gain weight. And it's going to make your hunger signals even stronger. And it's going to make it a lot harder for you to lose body fat every time. And if you have done this, it's not to say that you can't lose fat and keep it off.
Right.
But it's also more from a perspective of we want to reinforce getting to a place where you're nice and level. You're not yo-yoing.
I love that. Mary, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I was just going to say, just piggybacking off of the physical and the emotional, like when I think of the yo-yo cycle, it's so closely related to the other two that you said. Like you mentally feel defeated. You just spoke about, physically what's happening. It really is sad because these women feel like they are in a hopeless situation. So mentally and physically, they are stuck. They are defeated. So, I'm very proud of the fact that we do sometimes, I'm going to say actually often, see women coming to us in this very vulnerable state. And we're able to help them finally break that system, that cycle that they're in.
And it's a beautiful thing.
It is a very beautiful thing.
And the last one I wanted to touch on was this obsession with the scale. This was something I personally had to break free of. I was like a daily scale watcher. I weighed myself every single day. My mood
was determined. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's up, not happy. If it was down, woohoo, right? Like, let's go for the day. And I think like the cost of that for women is that you're really stepping outside of being present and living your life. You're really allowing an external factor that you don't really have a whole lot of control over determine your day, determine your success metrics, and have a lot more say over the next step that you might be taking. And, while non-scale victories are getting a little bit more attention than they used to in our industry, which I love, that really has to play a much larger role, and the scale has to take a lot more of a back seat, because if you could have your perfect physique, but it weighed more, which most of us it likely does, would you actually be happy? And I think 99% of people would say yes.
Yeah, I was in that same boat, Short. I think the other thing too with the scale is that, again, it's this mindset shift that what is the scale actually telling me? Because for a lot of women, like you said, that scale dictates their mood, how they go into their day, their confidence. And it's like looking at that number and just being focused on that number. There's so many other factors involved. And first of all, that number is not just your body fat, so many other data pieces. But immediately when they look at that number, if it's up, they assume I gained fat. They associate it with that, not, maybe I haven't gone to the bathroom yet, or maybe I had a, high sodium meal last night. Like there's so many other reasons, but immediately it goes to I gained fat. I am bad. I need to do this, this, and this now to get myself out of this weight gain.
Ultimately, it affects the decisions that you're going to make when you're stuck in this frame of mind. You're going to maybe cut calories lower. You're going to maybe add more cardio. You're going to abandon the actual plan of what's working in favor for an immediate change that you might see on the scale, ignoring the much bigger picture that is there for you. So with all of these very costly traps, physically, mentally, emotionally, what actually does work, Mary? I'd love if you could break down for us, what does tracking the right way look like, and how do women use this as a tool instead of a trap?
Absolutely. I love that. That's the thing. We need to break this down so that way women can actually start using it in the right way. So first thing is tracking. It's not forever. Now, I will preface this with saying, because T, you brought this up, like I love data as well. So for me, tracking is just a part of my routine.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge it because I actually find it like an empowering tool because it allows me to get all this information. But what we want everyone listening to think about is it's like riding a bike with training wheels. You don't need to keep the training wheels on forever, but you use them when you're learning, when you're building confidence. And especially in this case, you're creating the habit of understanding what your meals look like, how they make you feel. That's why it's the same with tracking. You're going to keep those training wheels on while you're working, especially if you're working toward an outcome-based goal, because we've already gone over, it's going to be very hard for you to reach those goals if you don't know what the heck you're eating. But you build that awareness. And then once you've got that skill built, you're not going to need tracking in the same way anymore. So that's why I still like to use it. But let's just say, for example, if I'm prepping for a photo shoot, my tracking is going to look a little bit different. And my level of discipline, let's say, is going to look a little bit different. But I still track in and out of those two scenarios. It's not the same way. It's not for the same reason. T, I know that you with your show, I was wondering maybe if you could kind of speak to that about like you track prepping for a show and not prepping for a show, right?
Yes, I want to speak to that actually, because I always tell people like during maintenance is really when you don't need to be tracking. If you've played your cards right, done the reverse diet, like follow the process. We guide our clients to like that. That's where the transformation begins. That's what we always say is when you're actually able to eat intuitively, but you understand what your body needs for the goal that you want to have. Okay. But Mara, to your point, when you have an outcome-based goal, whether that be leaning out or even as far as a show, which is kind of like an extreme lean out, or when you're making a change, like even building muscle, we want to make sure we're hitting numbers. Whenever there's any sort of change, this is when I tell my clients to tighten things up. Because when they end the lean out, this is when I want to reframe it. People will be like, all right, day one, lean out's done, photo shoot like is done, no tracking tomorrow. I'm like, hold your horses because we haven't even built up to like your maintenance yet. Because maintenance is more range. I think it's actually, they found that it's about a 300 calorie or so range, give or take. Whereas like when you're in a deficit or trying to build, it's more of a line in the sand. And either one of those directions, you're like, I'm eating less than I'm comfortable in maintenance, and then I'm eating more than I'm comfortable. Okay, leaning out for a show is really just getting like a hell of a lot more lean than you normally would be. You're peaking for one day, right? And I tell my clients this too. I'm like, you're not going to track like I am. You know, I'm tracking those shirataki noodles and they're like 8 calories. Sometimes even gum. Like, girl, I could have 50 calories of gum in a day. That's how much I love gum. But there's a spectrum. So for most of our clients, I think it's helpful to guide them through what this looks like is like, if they're in a lean out, we don't have most of our girls track veggies. They're pretty much tracking everything else except for like the negligible stuff. And then it's more like broad strokes until it becomes more of a fine brush. So I always tell people, hey, if you're still losing fat and we're a little bit looser with the veggies and the sugar-free sauces and, you know, the creamer and the coffee, yeah, that's fine. But then, things are stalled out. Okay, we're going to look at those things a little bit tighter. And if you were to go to the top of that pyramid and really paint with a fine brush like you're doing a show, every calorie counts. Like now we're talking the difference between like the gum and things like that, which most people don't need to go there. So would you guys add anything to that?
No, I think you nailed it.
You did. And that actually is perfect because next point being for people who are just, let's say, starting out, keep it simple and don't overcomplicate things.
Yes.
So that's what a lot of women do with a lot of these things. They go 0 to 100. So start simple, don't overcomplicate, begin maybe focusing on your calories and your protein, especially again, if you have this fat loss goal in mind, aim to stay in that calorie target. So you want to try and meet and not exceed it. Focus on hitting your protein. And then the rest of your calories can come from carbs and fats, ideally from whole foods, however it fits your preferences. The third thing, and this is such a big one too, is focus on consistency, not perfection. I think we probably say that in every episode that we talk about because so many women get tripped up thinking that things have to be perfect. And then the minute they go over or they eat something that, they didn't plan for, They're just like, okay, well, I'll just start again tomorrow. And they throw the day away. Sometimes they'll actually be like, you know what, I'll start again next week. And they'll throw the rest of the week away. So if you have a blip with tracking, use it as info. So get right back on track.
Yeah.
Be consistent because you'll see progress. But look at that. And that's actually the last point, which is we want you to look at data from tracking as information. It is not judgment. It is not there to tell you you're doing well or you're doing poorly. So if you had a day where you did not hit your targets, it's not failure. It is feedback. Instead of getting down on yourself, actually get curious. Like you said, be like an explorer. Be curious and say, okay, what threw me off? Was I under eating? Did I skip meals today? Did I skip meals and then binge? Maybe my meal prep wasn't good and I didn't have things prepared. So the point we want to drive home here is that tracking, when it is done in the right way and with the right mindset, it's actually one of the most powerful tools that you can utilize to reach your goals because it's going to build your awareness. It's going to teach you how your body responds. It's going to teach you about your hunger and fullness, and it's going to give you that structure. So that way, all this effort you're putting in, you're not taking a step forward and a step back. Your work is actually going to pay off.
I want to add one thing actually that I think is really important to mention because I like to get a gauge. Have you tracked before? I've wrote it down kind of like journal style. All right, what we're talking about, just to clarify, when we say tracking is you're using an app like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer. There's all kinds of apps right now. MyFitnessPal is like a very common one. When we say tracking, we mean one of these tracking apps, you're calculating the calories and the macros. We don't just mean like you're writing it down in a broad sense.
Yes, that's actually a good point.
I would love to add also, just to bring this all together in terms of context, because a lot of women will look at their macros just in the day. And I think from a coach's perspective, what I love to do is zoom out in a check-in period and look at the 2 weeks of what went on in that time frame. And then I'll zoom out even further and be like, what's going on in the last month or 2 months, because we'll have tracking. And a funny story, like one of my clients, she's been with me for a really long time. And we just introduced tracking more specifically so that I could see the granular level of data because we're working on digestion and tightening things up. And she's like, I feel like I'm not quite getting there. Like I'm not quite making the progress I want to see. I was like, okay, well, let's take a look at things. Zoomed out and noticed every single Saturday, Sunday, there was like this pattern. And the more granular we got, we're like, okay, it's always dinner on the weekends. And then we could have a very different kind of conversation to be like, okay, Saturday night dinner is what keeps throwing you off. And then it ends up snowballing into Sunday. Let's put a plan together specifically to address dinner. What's going to happen when you go out? What's going to happen when you're at home? What happens on Saturday morning that needs to shift so that you're set up better for your day? And then the rest of the weekend doesn't run you over and you end up putting yourself in accidental maintenance. And it becomes such a great tool for that data and that informed conversation that you're able to then move away from the feelings of like, oh, I feel like I'm not doing well, and actually be like, oh, it's this one thing that we have to change. We don't have to change everything. We don't have to abandon everything. We just have to make this one habit change.
That's such a good reframe. Data over feelings. And tracking actually frees up so much time because you're like, it turns out I'm not broken after all. We've all been there. And guiding a client, now we actually changed our system to reflect that, where right in the app that we use, we give them the plan, but also have them track alongside it. Because then our clients, they might, and we believe them when they say, I'm on plan. I have done this too, where I feel like I'm stalled out. And then you add things up and you're like, well, I'll be darned. It was the, it was the Saturday and Sunday in accidental maintenance.
Yeah. And then those aha moments, it's like that one little shift can change everything. I had a client recently, kind of same situation in the sense of like, doing all the things, I'm compliant. And she actually was very compliant. Not realizing that she was not tracking like cream and milk in her coffee because it was like such a negligible amount, she thought, but it was hundreds of calories.
Oh, yeah,
so
I saw
again,
that post.
That aha moment. And then it was like, boom, now her progress is like, we're on track. And it's very validating too, right? It feels good because like you said, it's fact over feeling and it's data. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I love it. Such a good episode.
Yes, this was such a good conversation. And honestly, we hope that all of you listening are walking away with some fresh insight around tracking. It's not negative. It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be obsessive. It can just be that tool that is going to be the game changer to kind of cross you over that threshold to making results. So as always, we are so grateful that you tuned in with us today. And if you got value, which I'm sure you did from today's episode, we would love it if you shared it because we know that there is someone in your life who could use this insight too. And if you share this episode to your socials, which we also hope you do, don't forget to tag us because we love seeing what resonates and what hits home with you. So we will catch you next week. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Get Sculpted. We hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to take the next step in your fitness journey. Remember, building your 2.0 body is a unique journey for you. It's about showing up for yourself consistently and not being perfect.
If you loved today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review and tag us on social at getsculpted.ca. Your feedback helps us reach more women like you who are ready to cut through the noise and make lasting changes.
For more daily tips, inspiration, and behind-the-scenes content, follow us on Instagram and check out our handles in the show notes below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Get Sculpted. Until then, remember this: getting sculpted isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter.